Start.
Hi, my name is Jessica Heyer, and I worked on this project with Asia Campbell and Devin Latkowski. The title of our project is a replication study to test the effects of awareness training on nervous habits during public speaking. Public speaking is an important academic and professional skill. It is common for people to express nervous feelings, discomfort, and/or anxiety associated with speaking in front of people. Commonly associated with the anxiety that people tend to feel while engaged in public speaking are pause fillers and tongue clicks. These behaviors interrupt the flow of speech and are generally viewed as undesirable. Public speaking is a socially significant behavior, and interventions that enhance the quality and confidence of the individual's public speaking skills warrant further investigation and replication. Some of the key terms in our project are habit reversal, which is a multi-component behavioral treatment package. This was originally developed to address repetitive behaviors and repetitive behavior disorders. There's 5 components to habit reversal, which are awareness training, competing response training, contingency management, relaxation training, and generalization training. A lot of these are things that you've probably encountered in your applied behavior analysis studies. And for today, we are primarily looking at awareness training. Awareness training is teaching individuals to be more cognizant of their behaviors, basically to be aware of their behaviors. It is primarily used for nervous habits and tics. Pause fillers are vocalizations during speech that are non-contextual, such as or misuse of the word like. Some of the research that applies to the independent variable or intervention is that a study found that habit reversal has been effective in reversing vocal, head, and facial tics. A young boy with Asperger's syndrome, Tourette syndrome, and attention deficit disorder used awareness training to reduce facial and shoulder tics. And filled pauses in public speaking were reduced in a study by Mancuso and Miltenberger. And they used habit reversal to do this. And that is the study that kind of led to the study that we replicated. The findings of this study also indicated that awareness training in isolation had potential to be just as effective as habit reversal. So that one component of the habit reversal procedure can be just as effective as using all 5 components. The dependent variable, or behavior targeted for change, which in this case is nervous habits in public speaking, is relevant because 60% of college students report fear of public speaking. Pause fillers throw off the flow of speech and usually occur when the speaker is searching for what to say next. In one study, participants reported that frequent use of the word made speakers sound incompetent, unprepared, nervous, and/or uncomfortable. So a pause that is not filled can be appropriate, but filled pauses give the appearance of somebody not being comfortable, not being knowledgeable, and therefore throw off the flow of the speech. The study that we replicated was by Spieler and Miltenberger. It examined the effects of awareness training on nervous habits performed during public speaking. It revealed a functional relationship between the intervention, which was awareness training, as we mentioned, and the behavior and nervous habits in public speech. There were 4 participants in this study, and they all experienced reductions in the target behaviors, and they also rated the intervention positively. The purpose of this replication study is to replicate the effects of the study by Spieler and Miltenberger to evaluate the effectiveness of using awareness training for the reduction of nervous habits in public speaking.
Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Lakowski, and I will be doing the next few slides. The participants in the study were 3 female students from Ball State, and we are all a part of this replication or online program in behavior analysis. We all shared a desire to improve our public speaking ability. Our sessions were all conducted on Google Hangouts, either using our cell phones and Show More, which is an on-screen recorder load. Originally, our sessions were recorded using just Show More, but we later decided to change to the use of cell phones because it made posting and uploading the larger documents to YouTube, and it was so way more time efficient for us to our cell phones. All of us were in 3 different time zones, which included Mountain Time for myself, Pacific Time for Asia, and Central for Jessica. So it made scheduling our sessions a little bit more difficult because of the time change. All sessions were done in our own homes between 2 group members, and we did not need to purchase anything in order to replicate this. There were target behaviors that we did for this study, and it was 3 nervous habits that are during public speaking, which include filled pauses, tongue clicks, and inappropriate use of the word like. Filled pauses was any occurrence of a speech sound or word, such as or ah, that have no semantic meaning in a sentence and do not add any logic or meaning. So an example of this would be my favorite book is Harry Potter. And a non-example would be something like pause, such as my favorite book is Harry Potter. Clicks were defined as the speaker emitting a click sound with his or her tongue. This one's a bit hard to provide examples of. We noticed recently that one of our professors in our model videos actually participates in tongue clicks. And it's something that I personally became more aware of after doing the study because I didn't think that I did tongue clicks. But after repping the study, I realized that I did. And so I'm just a lot more of myself doing those as other people. And the last nervous was like, which was defined as any occurrence of the word like in a speech that does not follow grammatical, semantic, or syntactic form. So an example would be he's like old, and then a non would be something such as he likes to eat chocolate ice cream. Something the use of a synonym such as this that snail is as slow as molasses. I will say that like was a little bit hard to detect in the speeches just in real time because I had to kind of think about if that makes sense or not. And so that was kind of one of the hard ones to detect. For data collection in OA, the participants served as principal investigators for other members. And so the principal investigator was the person that was watching someone else give their speech. And so in this case, Asia and myself were both principal investigators. So Asia recorded my speeches, and then I recorded both Asia and Jessica when they gave theirs. We recorded frequency of every behavior throughout 15-second intervals. And then the behaviors were all combined when calculating the rate of behaviors. Every participant has their own reliability data collector because we only had 3 people. And then each participant collected their own IOA data. If there were more people that were able to participate in the study, IOA would have been collected someone other than the speech giver. But seeing as we only had 3, do it ourselves. And then data collected by the PI and the RC were compared to produce IOA data, which was taken for 30% of the sessions that we. The way that we collected the for IOA was the smaller number of occurrences of the behavior in each interval was divided by the larger number of occurrences, which was later converted to a decimal. And then all the intervals were added together, and this was divided by the total number of intervals for each frequency. And then this number was multiplied by 100 to calculate a percentage of agreement. And the mean IOAs were later recorded for all the participants. This is an example of the data recording sheet that we used. And so we just, wrote session at the top and the participant and whether it was an IOA session, including whether it was based on intervention phase. The only thing that I did add on the side was what the time frame was for each interval, because sometimes to figure out when a frequency occurred and then to figure out time and interval that corresponded to is a little bit difficult. And so writing the times on that helped to manage frequency recording a little bit better. Fidelity. This scoring sheet was prepared by Spieler and Miltenberg from the original study. Reliability data collectors scored the implementation steps. This were scored as a yes and then divided by the total number of steps for each phase, which indicated the percentage, which we found was 100% across phases and participants. This is an example of the checklist for implementation fidelity for baseline and assessment. And so as you can see, the questions was the participant given a choice between two topics? Was the participant given 10 minutes to prepare for the speech? Were writing utensils and provided? Did the PI raise the white piece of paper after 4 minutes? And just remember that the PI was the person that was watching the speech. Did the PI raise the red piece of paper after 5 minutes had elapsed? And if the participant stopped speaking for more than 15 seconds or attempted to end the speech, did the PI prompt them to continue? And then lastly, was the speech at least 3 minutes? And I will say that some of these we did record as A since we were at a distance. We provided our own utensils, and then some did not reach the 4 or 5 minute marker. And so those we did not need to do. Next slide, please. This was the fidelity checklist for awareness training. And so some of these were very similar to this for baseline, but some of them did differ. And some differed were, number one, did the participant and the PI discuss the topography of the target behavior? And so during awareness training, it was required that the PI discussed what the behavior that person demonstrated in their speeches so that they could more easily detect when they in their speeches post-awareness. The new question was, did the participant practice identifying the target behaviors in a video clip before giving a speech? This was a little bit easier to do as well because we were able to share the speeches that we recorded with each other and then tell that person what time we detected a behavior, and they could see what the topography of their target behavior was. Number 6 also differed. Did the PI raise her hand each time the participant engaged in the behavior in the beginning of the speech and raise their hand to prompt the participant if he or she failed to detect the behavior on their own? And then the last one that differed from them was number 11. Did the participant identify 100% of occurrences of the target behavior in one speech or 90% across 2 speeches before awareness training ended? Or did the participant show little to no improvement in identifying their target behaviors? As I mentioned earlier, we didn't need to purchase anything additional to replicate this study. We did need a digital timer, which we all, I think, used our cell phone or our computers for that. A recording device, which also we used Show More, the free download recorder, or our cell phones. an online randomizer, which we just use randomizer.org. We were able to put our speech topics in there and shuffle it in order to get new speech topics each time we had to give a new speech. A list of generated speech topics, which we all came up with prior to starting the replication study, and they didn't really change in complexity. Most of the speech topics were something like, what was your first job, or who is your biggest role model? What are your 3 big goals? And so most of them very similar in complexity, as I said. We needed an full recording sheet, which we had made ourselves, computer with internet access to Google Hangouts as well, a pen, a pencil, paper to write notes, questionnaires, which we got from the original study, and then colored both red and white to signify when the speech had elapsed to both 4 minutes and 5 minutes. The design we used was a multiple baseline across participants design, which we know from class included a treatment variable. So in this case, this was awareness training, and it was applied to more different behaviors of the same subject in this setting. The procedure, when we won, we use the randomizer.org to generate the 2 different speech topics. And if we had already done that speech, we just continued to randomize them until we got 2 topics that we had given a speech on yet. Once the person picked between the 2 topics, they were given 10 minutes to plan as well as take notes on that topic. And then they did a speech no less than 3 minutes and no more than 5 minutes. When 4 minutes had elapsed, the person watched speech. I would raise a blank white sheet of paper. And then if 5 minutes had elapsed, the PI would then raise a red sheet of paper. And then as the person was giving the speech, the PI took frequency data on the target behaviors that we already discussed earlier. During awareness training, the participant and the principal investigator discussed the specific behaviors that the participant had done in their speeches, and then they were actually shown that behavior on a video recording so that they could see themselves exhibiting the behavior in their own speeches. For example, and we'll talk about this a little later, Asia had explained to myself that I had participated in clicks, which I'm not aware of. And so I was better able to detect when I was about to do that in later speeches so that my data started to go down for the frequency of tongues later on. During a speech, participant raised their hand on an occurrence of the behavior. And the PI also raised their hand on occurrence during the first 5 behaviors. And then they only raised their hands 2 seconds following the behavior, only if the person giving the speech did not detect the behavior themselves. This continued until on the same topic until 9% of the behaviors were identified across 2 consecutive sessions, or if the person was able to identify all behaviors in one speech. Post-awareness training ran the same as baseline at the procedure, but then booster sessions were needed if the behaviors did not immediately decrease by 80%, or if an upward trend in data started to happen. And then the participants completed booster sessions until data was stable, or if the next data point in post-AT fell below 80% of the average baseline level.
Hello, everyone. My name's Asia Campbell, and I will be concluding our presentation by talking about the results and then the discussion. So here is our multiple baseline graph. as you can see, the data for me, Jessica, and Devin. As you can see, our post-awareness training data weren't consistent across the three of us. I ended up experiencing higher frequencies of the target behavior than Jessica and Devin did during baseline. My data then went on to display the best functional relationship between the behavior and awareness training. As you can see that my behavior immediately decreased because of the intervention. Jessica's nervous habits suddenly declined after session 5 while still in baseline and maintained a varied pattern with no discernible trend or level during post-awareness training assessment. Devin's data was highly variable during baseline and then became more stable between sessions 8 and 10. After awareness training, her rate of responding decreased compared to most for baseline levels, but remained still relatively varied. With the purpose of reducing the behaviors more, Devin and Jessica needed booster sessions. Jessica needed hers after her second post-awareness training assessment, and Devin needed hers after her first post-awareness training assessment. It was decided later on for us to discontinue booster sessions in post-awareness training, but I will discuss that later in the discussion section. My habit behaviors in baseline were averaged to 4.5 behaviors per minute with a range of 3.4 to 7.25 per minute. And after awareness training, they decreased to an average of 0.11 behaviors per minute and with a range of 0 to 0.23 per minute. Jessica's habits in baseline average 1.4 behaviors per minute with a range of 0.45 to 2.5 per minute and decreased to an average of 0.88 behaviors per minute in a post-awareness assessment with a range of 0.58 to 1.44 per minute. And lastly, Devin's habit behaviors also decreased, starting with an average of 1.07 in baseline with a range of 0.31 to 2.3 to an average of 0.29 behaviors per minute in post-awareness training assessment with a range of 0 to 0.62 per minute. Devin remained in baseline the longest with 11 speeches given. Jessica gave 8 speeches in baseline and I gave 5. And here you can see the results of the social validity scales that each of the participants took. It was in a questionnaire form using 1 to 5 Likert scales, and on the bottom were results of from a similar questionnaire given by an external rater, which was Jessica and I, who had not been exposed to one of our peers' speeches. Therefore, we were the least biased compared to the PIs. So now I'm going to go into the discussion. Unlike the original study, not all participants reliably improved. My behavior ended up immediately improving, but as for Jessica and Devin's, there was overlapping data, meaning that there were some data points in the baseline that still ended up occurring within the same range in the treatment. Devin did end up improving, as you saw in the graph, but her improvement was varied. Jessica, on the other hand, had no improvement. When asked, each participant was asked why they thought their results occurred the way they did. Jessica and Devin both expressed that there was an increased pressure to perform better, so they had increased anxiety. I, on the other hand, was motivated to avoid booster sessions, so I ended up speaking slower and thinking about my words before I spoke. From these two different responses came the recommendations for future studies. One of the recommendations is to potentially test the rates of nervous habits in response to varying expectations on quality to see if you are less expectant to perform as well, perhaps you will perform better, worse, or if you have more expectations, would you perform better or worse? And the second recommendation is to test the effects of mild aversives as consequences for not meeting expectations. Talking from personal experience, the booster session was a strong aversive for me, so I actively avoided it by speaking slower. As was what was mentioned earlier, we ended up doing away with booster sessions completely after one booster session for both Devin and Jessica. Why? Because when you're not exhibiting high levels of the target behavior to begin with, then you have a smaller margin of error as per the requirements to the booster session, to experience the booster session. In the original study by Spieler and Miltenberger in 2017, the participants involved had drastically higher rates of the target behaviors than Jessica and Devin did. Jessica and Devin, even in baseline, did not experience many of the behaviors, even though in the beginning they initially thought they would. But what ended up happening was when they ended up going into the treatment phase, or rather the post-awareness training assessment, they weren't allowed to make even one mistake. For if they did, then they would have to do the booster session. And we all agreed that it is unfair to expect any public speaker to not do any likes, or uhs throughout the whole duration of their speech. Because even the original participants, the original study, were allowed to make some mistakes while still not having to experience a booster session. Awareness training was generally accepted, but not particularly enjoyed, which is also aligned with the opinions of all three participants. The external raters reported a decrease in the target behaviors generally. Other improvements that were detected were having more comfortable appearances, a faster speaking rate, better speech fluency, appearing less out of breath, etc. However, there was a reported decrease, or rather a worsening, of some of the choices, such as voice projection, use of movement, and use of gestures. A potential reason as to why these got worse is because there was an increase in anxiety as an expectation to perform better. So some people's reactions to anxiety is to clam up, or to move a lot less, or to speak quietly, which could have been what happened here. Limitations. Because of time restraints, we weren't able to do a generality or maintenance probe, so we're unable to confirm, or at least say there's evidence for awareness training still being able to have a positive effect on behaviors in the long run or in different environments. Another limitation was that 2 of the external raters were also PIs. This was something that was generally unavoidable because there were only 3 participants and 3 players within the study altogether. So everyone had to play at least 2 roles. And because the external raters were also PIs, that also meant that when the external raters were taking the questionnaires, they were completely aware of the fact that one of the videos they had to watch was of baseline where behaviors would be worse, and the other one was of a treatment or post-awareness training assessment where the behaviors would be better. With this knowledge, the external raters could have potentially rated the post-AT assessment higher just because they had the expectation that things would be better because of their prior knowledge of what was supposed to happen, regardless of what actually happened. Another limitation is that phase changes were not made early enough for Devin and Jessica. Jessica should have had awareness training after session 4, and Devin should have had awareness training after session 7. The reason why the researchers took so long in order to move phases was because there was the preconceived notion that stable data looked like a flat plateau, whereas an upward trend would have also been acceptable, but we weren't aware of that. So we accidentally waited too long, and had we done it early, had Jessica and Devin moved into awareness training earlier, there could have been a stronger argument for functional relationship between the awareness training and the behaviors. There was also an issue with being in different states and time zones. Again, this was completely unavoidable given that we're all in different states and the project called for us to work together. We had to record our speeches from Google Hangouts, either using cell phone cameras, or the program Showmore. But Showmore eventually became an issue. It stopped being usable for one of the researchers, and it was also problematic to upload to YouTube. Cell phone cameras, while easier to use, were not the best quality audio and visually. And when you have that plus faulty internet connection and lags, it's not easy to detect all of the target behaviors. There's a chance that PIs could have accidentally interpreted some of the lag as a behavior happening, which means that there's a very good chance that the data that we collected is not true representation of the behaviors that actually occurred. Another limitation is there could have been something unseen in the participants' environments that could have influenced their behavior. Because we are working based from webcams, the webcams can only capture so much of the environment of the participant. And because of that, there could have been something off screen that the PI couldn't detect. For example, Devin had a click pen with her for some of the speeches. And as her PI, when she was speaking, I was not aware that she was holding something. So I accidentally interpreted some of these pen clicks that she was doing as tongue clicks, because they sound very familiar, very similar to each other. Once her hand came into view, I was able to see the pen and let her know that she should put it down so I don't end up messing up the data further. And another limitation is the potential for vicarious practice effects. Because we're all exposed to each other doing speeches, there is a chance that we could have ended up getting better because we're learning from each other what not to do or what we should do. And so any and all improvement could have been attributed to that instead of the actual awareness training. Recommendation for future studies. For one, the external rater, the principal investigator, and participants need to be separate individuals. This is usually the case for any study. But because of the limitations put on us, we had no choice but to do things the way that we did. But in order to take away bias and to have participants go in as blind as possible, as well as any external raters, is the best way to go. The PI and the participant also need to be in the same location, in the same room, face to face, as well as needing to be in a room with all possible confounding variables accounted for. And if technology is absolutely necessary for whatever reason, then the researchers should spend the funds to get top-of-the-line tech, software, and hardware, and fast, efficient internet connection. Had we been willing to actually spend money on, say, the screen recording, perhaps things would have went better, and more behaviors could have been more accurately detected. Another recommendation for future studies is to potentially increase preparation time, see if that makes any changes in the behaviors, allow more practice time or any practice time, and increase the required speech length. We can also try measuring other nervous habits that aren't exclusively vocal, such as hair twirling or speaking as if your sentence ends in a question when it's actually a statement, or pulling on your shirt, or tapping your fingernails, etc. And also trying to do speeches with larger audiences and seeing if that has an effect on nervous habits. So lastly, our final thoughts, what we can take away from this project is that this replication study does add value to the literature on habit reversal and the use of awareness training, because it illustrates what happens when not accounting for confounding variables and how that could affect the usefulness of awareness training. More research is definitely needed to better establish awareness training as being truly effective for the treatment of nervous habits. This concludes specific groups 1 replication study regarding awareness training. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to hearing your comments and replying back to you. Have a good night, day, and rest of your semester.